This is the Constructionist Podcast, where we take ancient stories, the person of Jesus, current events and topics, and help you construct a new Christian worldview that's relevant and loving to those around you. I'm your host, Kevin Bates. I'm a semiotician and community builder, looking at the signs of the times to build a better future together. You are tuned into the Constructionist Podcast, and tonight we are starting our new series on cults. What a subject. We're going to explain what a cult is, talk about tonight how people get into cults, and the damage that's done because of them. We're doing a full deep dive, a full explanation. We're looking forward to this topic. We encourage a worldview that is built on the principles of Christ, and in this episode, we will be examining what is opposite of that through a clear and honest lens. So by doing so, we hope to offer insights and perspectives that will help you in your own journey towards a greater understanding of love and compassion for yourself and others. We want to assure you that in tonight's episode, we're not going to be fabricating anything. Actually, this subject in and of itself is very carefully researched. And so we want to give you information, give you ideas, and then send you on an exploration yourself. So our goal is to provide an honest and authentic perspective on our examination of cults. So this is our thinking space. In this time that we have together, we're presenting ideas and thoughts, and we're making our best attempt to explain very practical thoughts and some alternative ideas that people have bought into that are not very practical and toxic theologies to live by. So if you enjoy the Constructionist Podcast and want to support us financially, please follow the link in the chat or show notes on the social media platform you're listening to and visit our Give page. So your support will enable us to continue producing high quality content like this. But even more importantly, we want to engage with you, hear from you. We believe that through our interactions and discussions with listeners like you, we can continue to learn and grow together. So we value your feedback, your questions, and your ideas, and we're excited to build a community around a shared exploration called a communal hermeneutic. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know what you think. So Sharia and Jake, thank you for joining us. Just to be clear, Sharia has her master's degree in theology. Jake has his master's degree in theology. So we're in a realm that we've studied, taught classes on, shared thoughts in different religious settings and classroom settings. And so this material, some of it is new to us and some of it is brand new and new thoughts that we have never explored before. So we are excited to go over this material. So cults, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And to start out, we're going to go over some definitions. I think that defining and making sure that we have clear definitions on what we're talking about and how those definitions have changed over time and how what people have done with those definitions, blanket generalizations and such, we're going to be very clear and clear some of these things up. So let's start with a basic definition of cults, or a cult, not occult, but a cult. So letter A, C-U-L-T, not occult, but a cult. So what's a definition for that? Sheree, you have that definition for us. So why don't you start us out?
In simplest terms, I define a cult as, well, okay, let's back up. The dictionary definition is basically a religious system of worship that's centered around a particular deity or object or whatever. So according to Webster's, basically every religion almost is a cult. Right. It just has to do with how religions are organized. When we're talking about cults in terms of fringe religions or groups that are not healthy or safe to be a part of, I would say that those are generally characterized by a high control environment coupled with a charismatic or even narcissistic leader.
Okay, so let's pause for a second because I want to make sure that we're defining terms and clearing up anything that we're saying and really having a robust conversation and not just glossing over terms. So
Right.
before we go over charismatic leader and narcissism, I think it's important to note that we are talking mostly tonight and in our future studies over the next several weeks, we're talking about religious cults mostly. You can have non-religious cults. We're not necessarily exploring those though, because that's not really our realm and that's not what we're learned in.
Why don't
And
you give
so
a
we want to
definition of
stick
a
to
non-religious
materials
cult?
that we are. What did you say?
Why don't you give a definition of a non-religious cult?
You can have a political cult. You can have a therapy-based cult, or you can have a social-based cult. So there are social-based cults out there that
How about
people join.
multi-level marketing?
Well, that's how they start, and that's how certain cults are formed. It's a pyramid scheme where the initial members invite other members in. So you're invited in almost like a pyramid. And so that pyramid, you can have that pyramid in political realms, you can have that pyramid in social realms, even in business styled realms. And this is why some things that are out there, like groups or clubs, multi-level marketing ideas, social institutions, and therapy-based institutions or therapy-based groups sometimes are deemed cults. So it can go outside of the religious context or the religious idea.
Are networking groups cultic? Because they always feel a little culty to me.
Well, I would say that anything that has an extreme fringe ideology to it can run the risk of being a cult. But I do want to say something that's really important. All religions, even Christianity, in and of its even if its core is cultish. So you can deem Christianity a cult. You can deem Buddhism a cult. You can deem Islam a cult. You can deem any religion on the planet a cult. The difference is, and all religions really did start as a cult. If you think about like a religion that branches off of the mainstream religion, like Christianity did, they had a definite charismatic leader in Jesus. And so then we start following Jesus. That branches off. We have a new communal ideology. You have a new communal standard. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. What are we talking about here? We're talking about selling our houses, our wares, and joining this new family of brothers and sisters in Christ in new creation. Like we're going to take the Kool-Aid here pretty soon. But then the difference between a religion and a cult is the cult integrates itself within society. So there's a transition or transformation of the religious group into society. And then therefore it becomes a religion, not a cult. And it becomes more following maybe a philosophy or a theology or a heavenly idea or a godly or even a idolatristic idea, and that gets integrated into society. Cults segregate from society continually and ultimately continue the segregation away from integration. And so that I just wanted to bring those things up because I think that it's important, because it's very easy for people to downplay what we're saying about extreme ideology, saying, well, all religions are cults. They did start out that way, but they're integrated into society, making them a religion and not a cult. So with all that said, that was a lot. Let's go over charismatic. What's a
Well,
Shred? What's a
question real
charismatic?
quick. Let's have
Yeah.
Shred say the definition one more
Yes.
time, because I think
Please.
the more we repeat it tonight, the easier it's going to be for
Yeah.
us to move
Mhm.
forward.
True.
Right. And the other piece of that, so I'd say it's characterized by a high control environment. So there is a lot of control around people's behaviors, who they're able to spend time with, even down to the things that you're able to think, like you have to police your thoughts and everybody else's thoughts and everybody else's behavior. So it's a high control environment coupled with a charismatic or even narcissistic leader.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what classifies a charismatic leader?
Charismatic is someone with charisma, right? So somebody, I mean, who knows how to hold a crowd,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think is the simplest way to put it.
So the famous cult, one of them, we'll just talk about one, is the People's Temple.
Mhm.
Now, the People's Temple is, I would say, Heaven's Gate was my like a 97. Yeah, that's my adult life. So after college, I think it was 97. The Heaven's Gate, believed that they were going to take off with the comet, Hale-Bopp comet, or no, that was Hale-Bopp was the cult.
Was Heaven's Gate. Yeah.
Was that Heaven's Gate? Yeah. So
Yep.
So in 97, that's when that happened. When I was growing up, we always heard about Jim Jones and the People's Temple out of San Francisco. Very charismatic leader, very fashionable in dress, wore big fashionable sunglasses, drove fancy cars and, nice clothes and such, and had congressional politicians, leaders attending and affirming his movement. So you had strong leaders backing the People's Temple. This is why they chased him down. They knew who he was, and they caught wind of what he was doing. Therefore, they were showing up on site, and then they, what we joke around about now, which is not really a joke at all. But they all drank the Kool-Aid, which was a flavor aid that they had that was laced with poison. So it's very easy to be deceived by charismatic leaders, and I think we have to be very careful, even in our churches today. Some of the toxic theologies that are being promoted by some charismatic leaders. Don't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
I think when the character becomes more important than the message,
Yes.
Right.
that's when you get
The pastor's brand as opposed to the
church brand or
Yeah.
the gospel or whatever we're talking about. If and I think it's okay to jive with some pastors and not with others. But if you're following that leader so closely that like their words become ex cathedra, or like from the mouth of Jesus himself,
Right.
I think then we start to look at that is almost, it moves into the cultic realm.
Right. Because you do have to have some charisma to be up in front of people week after week.
Yeah, you have to have some self-esteem, some enjoyment. People have to enjoy watching you as well or listening. If you're not a captivating speaker in whatever method, like that would suck.
Right.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. Well, narcissism. So you said it borderlines a narcissistic tendency, and I think charismatic leader that moves into narcissism. Because narcissism is a classification of mental illness. So
Yes.
what is narcissism? Because that is a urban metropolitan term that I've heard thrown around. Everyone's narcissistic.
Right.
You know, my family's narcissistic, or every pastor on the planet now is narcissistic. So you said something funny in our pre-work, Shreya. It's more than
It's
my
not
ex.
just your crazy ex.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not just my crazy ex is narcissistic, right? So what is narcissism, and how do we truly identify it?
I'm just going to read a short overview from the Mayo Clinic online
Yeah.
because that's easy. It says narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. They need and seek too much attention and want people to admire them. People with this disorder may lack the ability to understand or care about the feelings of others, but behind this mask of extreme confidence, they are not sure of their self-worth and are easily upset by the slightest criticism.
So
think,
I think being
oh.
careful, we get upset when we get criticized. That doesn't make us narcissistic.
No.
Narcissism
When
is
we
narcissism
want
is
we
very rare. I
what?
think true narcissism is very rare.
Okay.
And so
Mhm.
I think like there's if there's two psychological terms that could check themselves and have people not use them at will, it's gaslighting and narcissism.
Mm.
And what we have done with those things, it truly lessens the impact on when people are actually gaslighting another person and they're meaning to, and when someone's a narcissist. And those two things actually go together, narcissism and gaslighting. Narcissism is extremely rare. And if you ever read the story of Narcissus, it's completely different than what we think the story is. It was more captivated with youthfulness and lust than with his own self. Long story, but anyways,
That's the Greek myth.
The Greek myth of narcissism,
Narcissus. Yeah.
How we interact with others, and is it for our own good, their own good? Is it a quid pro quo, like give and take relationship?
Right.
I think that if everything that we do is for our own benefit, and if everything that we do is in this quid pro quo, I'm going to give so I can take, then we enter into the narcissistic realm. We may have tendencies until it becomes chronic. And that's a psychological dysfunction that has to have a extreme medical diagnosis. But it's so rare as well because narcissists don't usually seek counseling.
So it's rare because it's not reported.
I mean, yes and no. Wow, Paisley.
I know.
So it's rare, even though it's unreported, but it's unreported because narcissists don't think they need help.
Right. It's
I think
definitely
something I've found helpful in understanding narcissism is that there also tends to be like an inability to understand other people as their own selves and not an extension of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a I must be admired and I must be loved or else.
Right.
But if there's anything negative spoken, it is an end of relationship.
Right.
Well, I think it's easy to have. I think it would be easy to have narcissistic tendencies. I think that we have a lot of tendencies that border the line of mental illness because we're human beings and we deal with mental things. So a lot of what we're saying sounds, and I want to be very careful, it kind of sounds like, well, I'm that way. I need attention. Or I feel like I need to be loved. So it sounds like we're just kind of deeming all of those emotions, those feelings. I would say the marker, though, of when something crosses a mental illness is the inability to self regulate, the inability to navigate those emotions to the point that you're really like taking from people's lives. You become codependent. You have these needs that only other people can fulfill,
Yeah.
and you start really taking from another person. This is why a cult leader creates so much control in the environment. Quickly, I just before we get too far away um, from the subject matter and too far into definitions, let's come back to the cults. I think that I think that there's a few cults that people would recognize that are famous, and the reason why they're famous is because they had these charismatic leaders that were narcissistic, and
Right.
definitely like it created a big splash in the media and people saw it. So a lot of people have deemed the Rajneesh in Oregon a cult. The
Mhm.
challenge with that is that's an accepted religion in India. So
So
there
it's not
is
fringe.
a so yeah, therefore it becomes not fringe. It might have felt fringe here, but it was not fringe there. And it's not fringe there. So there's people that still follow who's passed away now, the Rajneesh,
The bad one.
um, the Badwan, yeah. That
Are the fancy cars part of it in India?
Yep.
used to be, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so that definitely integrated itself, and so it turned into more of an accepted religion. But a lot of us do remember or have heard lots of stories, and this is close to my age. I think I was around, I would say, probably 6 when these people died, um, and were, I would say, manipulated to commit suicide, so forced suicide on their lives, was Jim Jones and the People's Temple. The reason why I've studied or have thought about just over the years the People's Temple is the People's Temple full name is actually the Deep People's Temple, a Disciples of Christ Church. And so Disciples of Christ is a Christian church or Church of Christ's cousin. So you have a Restoration Movement church, which was all disciples of Christ at one time. And then you began to break off of the disciples into Church of Christ and Christian church. Well, the People's Temple was a disciples of Christ church. And what was really interesting about the People's Temple, if you do, some research a little bit, is they had very progressive theology. So they were all into racial equality. They were all into the equal treatment of the
Gender.
genders,
Yeah.
and so male and female were equal in their group. You're talking the 1950s through the 70s, and so that language really spoke to several people groups and minorities and people of color, and you had like a very charismatic leader preaching a Christian message that had very like social and like a socialist almost theology or
Mm-hmm.
ideology. Well, that turned into the People's Temple in Guyana in South America, where they all traveled down there. 1,000 of them ended up there, and 900 and some odd people drank a substance and died when they thought that the world was coming to an end or that the government was coming after them. A lot of us in the 90s remember the Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians were a Seventh Day group, Seventh Day Adventist. And so David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, he believed that he was the Messiah, charismatic leader with narcissist. He was like the expression of Jesus, and he believed that all the wives or all the women, including the girls, the young girls that came, were his spiritual wives. And so if you can imagine the inappropriate behavior, taking of people's wives, but also molesting of children, definitely illegal stuff going on. Believe the apocalypse was upon them. It was an imminent type experience. And then when the feds came after it and started like basically knocking on their door, eventually I remember the crane coming in and that battle arm started tearing down that wall, and basically a fire was lit. I can't remember if it was on purpose or on accident right now in my research. It's too much to think about in this subject, but a fire was started, and that burned that compound to the ground. They were in trouble because of firearms. There was some trading of firearms, illegal sale, stockpiling of weapons and such that they were in trouble for. And so the feds, the Tobacco and Firearms Department, went after them. They found basically about 80 people in that. And then, of course, Heaven's Gate, that was small. That was like 30 some odd people that died. But there is one that is interesting that we read about, and this was called the Family International. And the Family International was basically began in the 1960s by a person named David Brandt Berg. And David basically started this group thinking that he was like a Messiah type. They used to call him Moses David or Messiah David. Mo, yeah. And but this cult still exists today in 80 countries. This cult still exists. Famous people like River Phoenix and Joaquin Phoenix were a part of this cult, and they escaped from it. Still talk about it today. How this cult influenced their lives and damaged their lives. So this is a real topic. This is not a some topic that is like for others. We can really get trapped, I think, very easily in cult type environments, cult type philosophy, and if we're not careful, just with the talk of division, the talk of just our government and politics and how we think the world is going to hell in a handbasket, it'd be really easy to join a group and just go off into, Colombia, South America, and have a nice life. So we need to pay attention to this subject matter, I think. Any continued thoughts on that? No.
Just are we talking about kind of the reason why we're studying this? Have we talked?
Well, that was
why?
one of my reasons why. What's your reason why?
As we're in a societal movement of deconstruction, one of the reasons to join a cult is kind of this disillusionment and then trying to search on what's next. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have a good idea of yourself, then it's very easy to get sucked into one of these environments. And so constructing yourself away from cultic behavior is important.
Right. Sharayah, what's your reason why?
It's that high control piece. And I see that same dynamic happening in mainstream Christianity, that we have this high control religion. And I think it's important to name that and to keep tabs on it and understand where that has the potential of going.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are going to talk about evangelicalism as kind of a cultic
Mhm.
behavior, and some other ones that hit pretty close to home as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the why is important. Thank you for bringing that up because I think this is a very relevant topic today that we are faced with mostly this idea, and that is cult philosophy. We're faced with a lot of cult philosophy these days, especially in the political realm, in some of these subgroups that we see that tend towards violence or towards segregation. Um, we see, you can probably deem some of the racial hate groups out there that because they have this ideologue of racial hate, led by a supreme grand master. I mean, just the idea of calling somebody these titles just makes it, culty. And and so there are very specific groups that exist today that are thriving today that deserve the name cult. Um, they draw people into their group ideology, begin to like brainwash and control, and you start doing things that get you trapped in that group. So if you could imagine witnessing violence against children at the Branch Davidian, well, what does that make you? That makes you an accessory towards child
Mhm.
violence. And so then now you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble if I blow the whistle on this. And so that keeps you from basically escaping or leaving. So that's an example of how to get trapped in a cult. Um, but I would say that in cult philosophy, there is at the core of cult philosophy, there's a subject called cognitive dissonance, which was developed in the 1950s. That terminology, the idea was, since human existence, but that terminology, cognitive dissonance, was turned around the 1950s. When you enter into a situation and something is presented to you as reality that you've never heard before, that is definitely in contradiction to what you thought, felt, and believed, you enter into a mental state of cognitive dissonance. Wait a minute. I'm being told now this is a reality, but I've always believed that this is the reality that I've held on to. But now I have to hold on to this reality, and that begins to fight in our brain. uh, there's a psychological uneasiness that happens inside of us that we don't know how to resolve and reconcile. And if we never reconcile it, we fully enter into cognitive dissonance. When a cult leader starts indoctrinating with control a group of people, that group of people enters into a never to be resolved cognitive dissonance where they're continually uneasy or afraid or not able to reconcile this reality that's being taught to them that's in contradiction to everything that they have believed. And so there's a what you call an internal disagreement going on that based on an external scrutiny, I guess, an internal disagreement based on an external like the end of the world is coming. Wait a minute. I don't think the end of the world is coming. And so then you just start like to panic inside, in a simple example. Um, and therefore cult leaders are able to get people in that state of cognitive dissonance and draw them into complete obedience. If you do this, this, and this, we will be safe from the end of the world. And so that's how that control or that obedience begins. But cult philosophy is everywhere
Yeah, I
in the
think we
political realm, in the social realm, in the religious realm.
we talk about group think a lot.
Yeah.
That the group has one mind, and we're human, and so we're tribal in nature. And so for protection, we do think alike. We look for people that are like us or of the same type of person.
Or we don't speak up if we don't think alike.
And we don't speak up when we don't think alike. And so like we are geared for cultic behavior, really. That it brings security to us when we all think alike. And so as we talk through like the reasons why later on, I think we got to have one more point to go through here. But as we look to the reasons why and how that groupthink is a really important aspect of cultic behavior, that it feels really good.
Did you just say that? Explicate that a little bit more. What feels good?
It is safe and brings a sense of security when people around you think the same as you. Is it good? Like innately good? It's not. Like the quote is, "Great minds think alike." But the second part of that quote is, "And fools seldom differ." And so,
I love that.
Yeah, and so that's very cultic, right? If you
Well,
all
yeah,
the
it
great
does.
minds think
It
alike,
does
but
feel great when people think like me.
yeah,
I mean, that's like, a boost, a shot in the arm. That's like
it feels good.
wow, like I must be smart.
But narcissistic smart.
Well, that might be my tendency of narcissism. I just think that what you said there is the reason why people get so easily sometimes drawn farther in. Like there's
Yeah.
reasons to get drawn in, which is usually familial ties or a friend of mine's a part of it, or hey, they have more fun than us, or whatever the superficial reason is that we went and had dinner for their meetup or whatever. So we enter into the cult for probably almost on accident. But how do we then draw into it deeper? Is these people all think alike and they believe alike and they act alike and they're happy.
Yeah, kind and happy.
Yeah.
They have
Well,
drugs.
yeah. Well, yeah, totally. I mean, that was the Bodwan and that group there. So I think that Christians have a problem though with deeming
That you
too
can stop
many
there.
things cults. Yeah, Christians have a problem. I would say that perspective is a skewed perspective, that everything is a cult. So like Mormons have been, in Christian circles, Mormons have been, deemed a cult. Jehovah's Witnesses have been deemed a cult. Lots and lots of groups have been deemed a cult. The issue there is everybody that's not like me is a cult. That's the philosophy being like, if you're not evangelical, you're a cult.
Okay, but hang on, stop there. Do you hear it?
Yeah. What?
Everyone who doesn't think like me is the cult.
Right. Oh, right. I know. Right. Yeah. That's like that shows me that I'm a cult. But that's a really easy philosophy to adopt because they're weird. They do weird things. They don't have windows. They're just weird and they have weird practices.
But I mean, to be fair, under true definition, the LDS Church and Jehovah's Witnesses both started as very cultic.
So did Christianity.
So did Christianity, but to say that they are not cults is not totally fair.
Well, I think what makes certain groups, and I'm not going to name these names, but I think that what makes certain groups toxic, let's just call it toxic. You can call it whatever you want. Call it a cult, call it toxic. Toxic groupthink is if you act a certain way or if you leave us right? We can't have relationship with you. So any group that disfellowships you, like breaks ties and relationships and separates and isolates to try to get you back,
Control. Yeah.
um, that's borderline toxic. Well, no, that's
No,
not
that-
borderline. That is
That
toxic.
is.
Yeah,
You should just
100%
say
toxic
that's
behavior.
borderline.
Yeah, that's borderline. But also the hiding and the secrecy of like violence and
Crime.
sexual assault and all of these
Mhm.
things. These are all toxic behaviors that we've seen in every single religious group, including Christianity. We're disfellowshipping you because you slept with your partner or whatever. That disfellowshipping makes us more of a cult. That is a control piece of
Mhm.
cult. And so if we don't want to be deemed a cult, we need to drop some of this toxic theology and praxis that we have that could definitely we fall into the if you don't think like me, you're a cult. But then that makes me a cult.
Well, I mean, let's talk about. There's two ideas. You have the denotation
Yeah.
of a word and a connotation of a word. Denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. Connotation is the collective group, societal's understanding of what that word means. And so all that we are talking about right now is all the connotation of cult. And so this isn't the true definition of cult. Shreya, why don't you start out with what is our working definition of cult, and then what is the connotation of cult?
A religious group characterized by a high control environment, usually centered around a charismatic or even narcissistic leader.
And so that is our working definition of cult. And then, so what is the?
So that's the denotated.
That's the connotation.
No, that's the denotation.
Oh, the dictionary definition is any religious system that's like a worship system centered around a central figure or object.
Yeah, so that's the denotation.
Got it.
So, like, in truest sense of the word, any religion is a cult.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're trying to zero in on is that first idea of cult as a high control environment.
Right.
Well, I think something else, like we just talked about how Christians tend to use cult to refer to anyone who isn't us. But I also think it's important to identify that it's used as a pejorative. It's a put down. You're a cult. Right. It's meant to be an insult.
Right.
Yeah.
The connotation of the word is meant to be an insult.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Which is really rude.
Oh, I've been told I'm a cult leader just because I'm a charismatic pastor, Jesus follower. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm just a cult.
Yeah. We don't all think the same way, though.
I know. There's one person I'm thinking of that doesn't think like me. Yeah. Well, I think that if we could move into, did we talk enough about the connotation of the word cult? I don't want to miss anything there.
I think it's important just to restate it. We've been talking about connotation the whole time.
Yeah.
The idea of this high control environment that we understand a cult as. The denotation of a cult is just a system of religion and its practices around it. So yeah, I think that's enough.
I just thought of a political cult.
Go ahead.
A political cult, according to this definition, connotation, and denotation, would have been the Nazi Party. So the Nazi Party had a very charismatic, narcissistic leader, classic definition to a completely mentally ill, that a group of people that had societal problems or feelings or thoughts about their current
Lives,
situation. That person comes
Mhm.
in as a messiah that's going to carry us into the next generations of, a more thriving life, and then millions of people die because of it. So
And
that would be a cult leader.
yeah, and I think a good thing about bringing that up as well is that through experiments afterwards, everyone was susceptible
Yes.
to
Mhm.
follow that leader, whether you think you are or not.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
it took a very strong person to stand up against that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the people that did stand up against it died.
Yeah,
Many
I
of
mean
them.
that's the cult, right?
Yeah.
The ultimate banishment is
Mhm.
death.
Right.
Yeah.
So cult philosophy, though, is let's just camp on that. I mixed two things up. Let's go back to how people get drawn into cults.
Mm. Okay.
Again, we talked a little bit about it, but let me give
Mhm.
kind of a step process of how people get drawn into cults. People get drawn into cults for a variety of reasons, but if you just look at some psychological studies of how people get drawn into traditional Heaven's Gate, People's Temple,
Mhm.
the People's Church, some of these cults that are out there, the Branch Davidians, how do they get drawn into that? Because that seems really odd to me, to pack my bags, sell everything, and move to Guyana to follow some person and live off the land in a commune. That just doesn't seem right to me in my head. So how do I get from where I'm at to packing my bags and getting on a plane and leaving? So,
Mhm.
so I think that the first step that any psychological studies identified is there's a plethora of societal problems, and the societal problems are accentuated in the media. And in the media, like whether it be now paper or social media or any kind of news feed that we're on, and such, that media promotes, especially now in our current technological age, it promotes a certain mentality through an algorithm that you're listening and watching and viewing and clicking on. So when you click on something on the internet, that data is collected, and then you start receiving more of that same subject matter. So if you start believing or thinking in a certain realm about societal problems, you actually, in today's world, you're going to be fed a lot. One of the reasons why we don't see maybe cult groups emerge today like they did in the 1960s and 50s, 60s, and 70s was because today we have more of a global information age, where you can click off of those things and click onto other things and say, oh wow, there's other options to these societal problems besides this one charismatic leader. So first, it starts with a plethora of societal problems that's introduced by someone that is pretending, thinking, believing themselves to have all the answers, to be able to share that answer with you in your cognitive dissonance, where you've always believed that we can have the American dream, and it's all about
Mhm.
the family values, and it's all about, my wife and two kids and a nice house and a couple of cars and a job to pay for it all. And now in our societal problems, we have inflation, and who can afford these electric cars anyway, and houses are through the roof, and I can't afford the mortgages. And so we have all of these societal problems, and then you add all the sociological societal problems um with racism and othering people and houselessness and the abortion topic, and you start throwing in all these other things, and it's very easy to get just sometimes an extremist type of silo of conversation. Very easy.
Mhm.
I see it all the time now. And so then somebody comes along and offers you an answer, and then they offer you belonging. Like, you can have these answers and belong to our group. Oh, and you go, yes, okay. So then you start going to a house meeting or this place that they meet, and you sit and they feed you dinner and they have good beer, and you're like, this is a great topic. And oh, I believe the same as you. And we're all just one big, awesome group,
God's
and
family.
they're all my age, and they all drive the same kind of thing and complain about the same complaints and can't afford the same things. And so then we get together, and then we start swirling in our algorithm that we've created, this silo of information. But there's this one person that's always looming, and they're there in the foreground of the conversation, leading this charge of, you're right, you're right, you're right. There is societal problems. I have this answer. Yes, you're all the same. Why? Because the world is coming to an end, or the world is against you, or whatever that is. And then that person gives you a purpose out of the destruction or the societal problem. Well, if we would move to this place, we can develop our utopia. We can develop this place. Or this comet is coming, and we're all going to wear the same clothes and shoes, and we're going to take this medicine that's going to take us to a different place. So these new realities are presented as a new purpose. So that's how people get involved. It's not just for some, it's probably an overnight thing, but for others, maybe, and people with long-term addictions, people with like lots of trauma, people with a lot of emotional trauma and such, it's known that they can be drawn into cults easier than those that haven't gone through trauma, which is very unfortunate, threatening, and manipulative, and sad. But that does happen to people that have gone through lots of trauma. So then you have that person getting sucked in maybe quicker, or maybe just they find belonging. Finally, I have a mom and dad. Finally, I have a family. And they just draw in really easily.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how people get drawn in.
Mhm.
So
We see that a
Go ahead.
lot. We see it a lot, especially we are going into an election season,
Mhm.
and cultic behavior. Just think of QAnon.
Mm-hmm.
That how easily people are sucked into these really feel good responses to the problems that they believe that they have, or like an affirmation of the neuroses or the fear that people do have.
Mhm.
I think we see that a lot, and we'll probably get into that more when we talk about nationalism as a cult. But our media and what we take in, what we ingest, definitely plays a part in our mental fortitude. And so that's when it becomes very easy, when that starts to break down, that we enter cults.
Mm-hmm. Any more thoughts on that, Sharia?
Kind of like I used to teach a unit on cults with my senior Bible class. And when we got to this topic about why normal people get drawn into cults, I remember one class in particular, looking at all of the different studies and everything out there on that topic, realized that as they were going to be college students the next year, that was an especially vulnerable time in their lives, because they're probably moving away from home for the first time. So they're in a new environment, like everything's new and unfamiliar. They're trying to be an adult on their own for the first time and figure out who they are and what they think and what they believe. And so when you have a group, particularly a religious group, since I taught at a religious school,
Right.
when you have a group that just comes in and offers you answers and belonging and security, it's really affirming and you feel safe and it's really attractive. And that was a little bit of a wake-up call for my poor 12th graders.
Oh, yeah. Well, they give the illusion of comfort. That's the thing. They give this illusion of comfort, and then they
is
just
it illusion or is it
love
actually
on you
comfort?
and love bomb you and just love, love, love. That's what we're about. And it is when you become disillusioned, you do want comfort and you do want love. And when that group is just all roads lead there, and it's scary. It is scary.
Do you think it's illusion or is it actually comfort?
I would
think
say, go ahead.
in the early stages, you're not going to be hitting up against the boundaries. So like, is it real or is it manipulation? I don't know. But
I mean, you're talking Waco, Texas, so I don't think there's anything comfort about Waco, Texas. Illusion of comfort. My thought on that is it's an illusion, because comfort is a temporary state. And when you give a illusion of comfort, that means that state can be achieved all the time. And we're designed as human beings to live in comfort and uncomfortability. So we're designed to stretch and to grow and to learn and to get into that stretch zone, which is uncomfortable. When you give this illusion of comfort, that means you don't have to change. You can just be here. That is an illusion of, I guess, an illusion that's the state you can live in all the time. That's just not reality. What do you think as you ask the question?
I think it's actually like actual emotional comfort. And that's why it's so easily to get drawn in, because you are comforted emotionally.
But would you not agree that that's temporary?
I mean, as Soraya was saying, as long as you're within the boundaries, I think that you and the boundaries, I think, are pretty clearly communicated by subject of people who have gone outside those boundaries. Then,
right.
But I think I know what you're saying is that it is an illusion because the comfort is not for your best interest.
Right.
Is that what you're going for, Kevin?
Well, I think that the cult leader, what I've studied about it and different things that I've, watched different cult leaders speak.
Yeah.
And they're giving the illusion of comfort because the comfort that they're giving or promoting is unattainable. So they're giving this illusion that you can attain this comfort that's just not attainable. It's not. You might experience a level of comfort like, oh, I no longer have to pay my rent because I'm in a commune and I'm fed and all I have to do is work the garden. And, like that might be a level of
Why am I
comfort.
naked right now?
Yeah, exactly. But like total peace of mind, total health, total tranquility, total
Are all
isolation.
illusions anyway?
They are illusions. Yeah, they are illusions. Total tranquility is an illusion. I guess you could say after I, you know, achieve or go, or God takes me to heaven, I guess that is complete tranquility, whatever that looks like. But to achieve that on earth, I think that our human desire usurps that, because our
Yeah.
human desire requires uncomfortability. Human desire to achieve more, to be more, to grow more, that requires us to be in states of uncomfortability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I'm trying to like communicate there.
I hear you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's kind of like a cult leader in the sociological problems. They give the absolute answer.
Yeah.
Like they have this
Right.
absolute, this is the truth. And
The final
the
solution.
the
Mm.
final solution to the problem, right? So yeah, they give this absolute answer. That's why I love my friend John, because John always asks me or includes these like thoughts, into our discussions. He says, I don't trust pastors that say that they're absolutely certain and this is the Bible and 100% this is what is true and blah blah blah. He's like, I don't believe a pastor that says that. I need a little bit of gray
Sure.
area.
Yeah.
And when a pastor
Mhm.
says, I'm about 60%, about 70% there on this subject, and now I got 30 or 40% that I want you to think for yourself, that actually makes me more of a pastor than a cult leader when I give that breathing room of,
Mhm.
hey, let's just live in this unknown for a while, because I don't know, you don't know, we won't know.
And
So
that's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. To live in that, I think that certainty in the cult philosophy, we need that certainty.
Yeah.
We need that. And the inerrancy of scripture, I've talked about, like, I don't believe in the inerrancy of scripture. What? It's just crazy, like that I would not believe in the inerrancy of scripture. I go, what are you talking about? Like, inerrancy is like almost like fake doctrine. You don't even you
Not
can't back
almost.
it up with
It
anything.
is. It is fake doctrine.
Yeah, so it's like, why are we even talking about this? I understand that you want the Bible to be like a good book and a rule of life and the word of God, and it still can be all those things and
It's the
have some
basic
errors
instruction
in it.
before leaving Earth.
So we make up things like, well, in its original form, it's inerrant. Okay, what? That doesn't even make sense. So I think that absolute answer is, a signature of a cult leader. Just like the illusion of comfort. I have the illusion that I have the absolute answer, right? Hey, let's talk about Christian nationalism, because we need to get into this deep over the next weeks. And I want to talk about just to give the introduction of how do we stay clear, or how do we identify cult philosophy like Christian nationalism? I believe that Christian nationalism is, if not the biggest threat, it is a big threat to Christianity, probably in all of its history. And I think that Christian nationalism, um, according to our definitions, our thoughts, our ideas here, would be considered a cult philosophy. Some people would deem it a cult because of leaders that have promoted it. But let's just for now call it a cult philosophy. Do you have some initial thoughts? Give some introduction thoughts on Christian nationalism.
My first thought is that no other time.
What is it, Jake? Define it for us first. Christian nationalism.
Christian nationalism is the idea that we are a Christian nation and our success as a nation is tied towards our connection to God, and God blesses those who believe in God And so therefore we are the best because we believe in God, and so we're going to be the winners. And if we're not the winners, that means God's favor is not upon us, and
Mhm.
that people who are poor, people that are other abled, if they cannot promote that advancement of our society as a Christian nation, if they're taking away from that through welfare and wellness programs, that they are actually standing in the way of the will of God. And so anyone that is lesser, anyone that does not make income, anyone that does not add to the population of the nation is also standing in the way of God.
So there was a lot of nuance there. Let me give a very clear book denotated
Okay.
definition of Christian nationalism. Is a type of religious nationalism that is affiliated with Christianity, in which the end goal is to achieve an absolute Christian theocracy within a society. It primarily focuses on internal politics of society, such as legislating civil and criminal laws that reflect the view of Christianity and the role of religion in politics and social life. So basically, church and state begun to marry one
Mhm.
another very closely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so So yes, I agree with all that you're saying. I feel like you gave a lot there, which is all important, but just honing in first on Christian nationalism is where church and state marry each other closely,
It moves into
and the end goal is a nation of that's ruled by theocracy, Christian theocracy, where the laws that we have line up with a Christian philosophy.
yeah. And if we don't follow those rules, that we will not be blessed. And if we follow
Yeah.
if we are blessed, then we have
Mhm.
followed those rules.
Sheree, do you have any introduction thoughts to Christian nationalism?
Um, the idea of moral purity also seems really important to that movement.
Right.
There is one right way to live, and you got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So those that are alternate in their lifestyle, like LGBTQ or trans lifestyle, all of that is not an acceptable form of life, or maybe a lower form of life of
Because it does
somehow.
not
So
it doesn't add to the
Single
population.
mothers.
Yeah.
yeah, single mothers, single people, because
Mhm.
marriage, of course, is a pinnacle of Christian,
Right.
like, grace or
Culture.
whatever
Yeah.
culture. Yeah. Hmm.
I think
My quiver is full, so lots of children.
my initial thought for Christian nationalism is to just look where the flag is placed.
Hmm.
And so Jesus talks against empire all the way through the Gospels. And if our allegiance, if the flag is on our church stage or outside of our building, then our allegiance is also to country, not only to God. And so when we start to muddy those waters, I think there's some really big trouble that we're about to get into.
So I'm going to take a humble position. I'm going to force myself to take a humble position. I believe that I am a Christian nationalist. I've thought about this all day before this topic. I believe in Christ. Christ is my Savior, the Lord of my life. Christ teaches me how to live, accept, include, and care for the other. The Bible teaches me that faith without those kind of works is dead. Jesus teaches me that the greatest command is to love my neighbor. So if I actually believe those, which I do, I want the people around me to live and breathe and enjoy that as well. That's the Christian message that I believe in, and the nation that I am involved in. I want our nation to love our neighbor. I want our nation to include the other, to take care of the poor, clothe the naked, sick, and hungry. I want the immigrant to be welcomed, the foreigner to be welcomed. I want our nation to not have walls. I want our nation to, when the thousands come that are hungry, I want to share the meal like the fish and the loaves. So I look at my Christian nationalism. I have a very strong conviction that I hope that our nation can become that.
That's a
I
really
hear
yeah.
it's very sweet. But I think those ideals are also found outside of Christianity. Ideas of caring for the poor, of everyone having enough. I don't think that's limited to Christianity.
But my Christianity tells me that all Christ is in all people. Colossians 3. There's no longer male, female, Jew or Greek, barbarian, Scythian, circumcised, uncircumcised. We are all one in Christ because Christ is all and in all. I'm just throwing this towards you because
I think
that
it's
I
may need
something very. Hold on a second. I think it's something very real, and when we deem you're a Christian nationalist, I think what we're actually saying when we say that is you have a very evangelical, toxic Christianity that you want the nation to follow. But who wouldn't want to follow the Christianity and be a part of the environment of the Christianity that I just promoted?
That is not the wide stream view of Christianity.
I know, but I'm just kind of throwing it at the table that I'm not a Puritan Protestant experiment person. I'm not a health and wealth gospel person. I'm not all these things, but I would say that I do want our nation and our politics and our laws and everything that we do. I want that to happen, what I just said and promoted.
Yeah. I mean, John Calvin was a Christian nationalist in Geneva.
Yeah. I think it depends on what kind of Christianity we're promoting, right?
Yes. However, the current understanding of what Christian nationalism is not a feel-good, give to the poor and the needy Christianity. That's not. I would not say that that's Christianity. What they're promoting, that is a different. Right. That's why we're talking about it as a cult. I may have to edit out where you say I'm a Christian nationalist because someone might come and take that and just take it out of complete context.
Totally.
Right.
Well, I mean, I just said that just to kind of show, a certain nuance. Version of Christianity that I want for the world.
Yeah.
And I wish for the world. I totally get it. When I was in Boston, I was walking around the streets of Boston and an LGBTQ pride flag was hanging right next to an American flag. And they were up and down the streets. And also in Hell's Kitchen in New York, I saw the same thing. So, usually, especially in the West, on the West Coast, Christian nationalism is identified as kneel at the cross, pray to the cross and salute the flag, or kneel to the flag and pray to the cross. And they're usually symbols that are right next to each other in the back of a Dodge, truck. Huge truck dually with a big American flag in the back, and don't tread on me on the other side. And he is greater than I symbol on the back.
Yeah.
We got all those bumper stickers going on.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm not a traditional Christian
There you
nationalist.
go.
Yes. You don't have to edit that out.
I wanted that one out. Okay.
Any other introductory thoughts? Because we're going to spend a whole week on Christian nationalism and what it is. Any other introductory thoughts?
I think I'll wait till next week.
Introductory thoughts. Why is evangelicalism? Let's take 3 minutes. Why is evangelicalism a cult philosophy? Sharia?
Okay, so one of the people that I follow on Instagram and their newsletters and books and everything is D.L. Mayfield. And they've been looking at Christian nationalism and how that plays out and what has happened with the evangelical church. And their current project right now is looking at Dobson and the focus on the family movement, and how that's connected to Christian nationalism, how that has shaped America into what it is today. And so that specifically looks at Dobson's authoritarian parent style. And the idea there was to raise children who were immediately obedient to God's authority. But God's authority is always mediated through someone. And so that means raising children to be immediately obedient to whoever their authority is, whether that's their parents, their pastor, whoever. And so when I think about, that's one of the things that comes up for me recently when we're talking about evangelicalism and Christian nationalism and how that plays into it being a high control religion.
Right.
Because children are trained to never step out of line.
So that's one piece of evangelicalism is a controlling parenting style. Another piece is moral control. The purity movement of evangelicalism, I would say, deems it on the side of cult behavior or cult philosophy. There's some other, like a long litany of lists that we're going to give here in a couple of weeks when we talk about cult philosophy and evangelicalism and Christian nationalism. So with that, we're going to end. And this was a great introduction. I think that I'm looking forward to some specific cults that we can talk about and what they believed and how they got sucked. People got sucked in and ended up drinking the Kool-Aid, as some people just say now as a flippant comment. They literally drank the Kool-Aid because of high controlled environments based and focused on a charismatic leader that definitely moved towards narcissistic tendencies. So that's our subject matter. We're excited about it. Thanks, Shreya. Thanks, Jake. And with that, good night, everybody.